appreciate that. This program is being recorded, so it will be available for viewing later on. The recording is on now. And you also receive a survey, and we really do appreciate your input on these surveys. It's helped us in planning. It's helped us in giving us ideas on talk. So please take the few short minutes to fill that out and get that back to us when you do receive it. So today we will have Brandi Keller. She will be speaking on Kool plant. You mind switching to the next slide? There we go. Kool plant projects. Brandi is our Master Gardener Program Coordinator. We are glad she is back in the office. We've got two more talks for later on this month. Next week, we will have food safety. So we will have Amanda Cripple, who is our one of our family and community health agents. She'll be talking on food safety in the kitchen. And then to close out the month, Brandi will be back talking about wildlife-friendly garden tips. So with that being said, we are recording. Everybody's got their mics on mute. Everything is looking good. So Brandi, it is all yours.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Is my camera on? Can you see me?
No.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I can see you.
Okay.
Oh.
All right.
Yes.
It's just... All right, so yeah, welcome. I know this was initially planned last month, so thanks for being patient and showing up today. So the talk is Kool Plant Projects. I'm Brandi Keller, the Harris County Master Gardener Program Coordinator. And I've done a couple different youth talks, and there's just always so much information out there. So I really do hope that you find this useful today. Some of the topics we're going to cover today are colorful carnations, plant parts, vegetables from scraps, making recipes, and watching seeds grow. I did throw in some extras though. So to start, I pulled this list from the South Dakota State University Extension. And of course, it's just a categorization of different levels of experience. So it's not necessarily about age because you can have a 10-year-old that knows their way around a garden much better than a 16-year-old. Most of what we're going to talk about today would really fall under beginners and maybe even going into intermediate. So the first project, this is one I've done a few times throughout the years, but it's always impressive, and it's not just impressive to kids, even adults love to see it. So basically, you take a white flower and you put the stem into dyed water. And you see how that flower changes color. What's really behind this experiment is to see how water and nutrients actually travel up the plant. Of course, they first travel up the stem into the leaves and then into the petals. These flowers, and most of them that you see, are pretty firm and perky, but the is mm, but as a plant wilts, obviously it gets, just a little bit floppy. So just how a plant is hydrated, you can tell right away. So the various colors can represent nutrients. So you're first going to start, it's just 3 or 4 simple materials. So you're going to start out with flowers. So in this case, it's the carnations, but you can also use celery or like the Napa cabbage that are upright. For me, I mean, the celery doesn't always end up as pretty. I think that the Napa cabbage is lovely. And then, of course, the carnations, there's a lot of surface area here. Many sources say that You can leave them in 1 to 24 hours and then voila, it's done. I've never had that happen. For me, it's always taken 2 to 3 days. So the top photo is right fresh, put in there. You always want to put a fresh cut on that stem, so that way the water is able to travel up a lot better. This bottom picture is after 24 hours. And this is something else that you can explore with your kids. And this can be kids at home or a classroom, it doesn't really matter. Um, but different colors always seem to be absorbed differently. I mean, obviously here the orange and yellow have accumulated up at the tips of the petals a lot easier than the greens and the reds. And this is 2 days later. So now you can see the red is coming through a little bit more, the green. Basically, when you have transpiration happen, it's going to evaporate off of the leaves and the petals. And as it does that, is actually pulling the water up behind it. So it's always going to keep that capillary action going. And this is just a close-up. I always find it interesting how some of those tips of the petals really congregate some of that, the concentration of the dyes. And this is an older picture. This is using Queen Anne's lace. I didn't have to purchase these at the grocery store, but we don't find them down here. But you can see that the coloring was just absorbed a lot better. Obviously, these flowers are smaller, less surface area. So there's so many ways that you can experiment just with this, the same concept here with different flowers, leaves, things like that. Going on to plant parts. So this is always really fun for kids. This specifically right here on the right is a JMG page where they just cut out the vegetable words and match it to the plant part. So you have your reading and your categorizing, um, which, that's okay. I think it's a lot more fun when you actually have a plant right in front of the kids. We've done this in the classroom before. So in the spring, when there's tomato plants being sold, you can pop the pot off, and then usually there's a healthy amount of roots there. And then you can talk about from the bottom up all the different types of all the parts. So starting at the roots, working up the stem to the leaves. And then with the tomatoes, a lot of times you will find plants that actually have flowers and possibly the start of the fruit. So you have two of those components right on the same plant. Um, I'm going to show the next slide. That's going into more of the plant parts, but I do have a PDF. It's a 5-page PDF with diagrams, examples, quizzes, and even a plant song to the tune of Muffin Man. So once everyone does the survey on this, then I will send out this PDF with, it's a pretty full page of resources. So this is then going into just the other plant parts. So if you have produce, if you're bringing produce home on a regular basis, or if it's for a classroom, you can buy a handful of vegetables. But this is really taking it a step further from the last slide, and you can practice with them. See if they can identify. Starting off with the flowers, I can say that most kids are not going to immediately recognize that those are undeveloped flowers. As a matter of fact, a lot of adults can't. So that's always fun. And then even going into the stems with the celery and asparagus. Leaves, we all know spinach, lettuce, they're leaves. But did you know that onions are modified leaves? So what we're eating is a modified leaf. Going into roots, I mean, it might be a no-brainer for us that, a carrot is a root, but when you get around some families and kids, they actually don't know that carrots grow underground. and then going into seeds, and then of course the vegetable fruit debate. So what is the actual difference between a fruit and a vegetable? And that is that fruits develop from a flower and then they have seeds. And then vegetables are everything else, the roots, leaves, stems. So tomatoes technically are fruits. The next project is vegetables from scraps. And I got this idea from the Harris County Master Gardeners. I'll talk about them on the next slide, but they did a series growing fresh vegetables from just from scraps that you have from other meals. There's a list on the left. So things like carrots, celery, green onions. The obvious benefit is that you can save money, but growing vegetables from your scraps, I think, is just plain fun. You know, it's a challenge. Is this actually going to work? And then when it does, you know, there's always wonder, amazement and wonder. So the celery and lettuce can be grown from basically that bottom of the head. Just make sure that the cut side is up and that there's about a half an inch of water in a shallow bowl. And these, as you see, are growing at a windowsill. But once they start putting on some roots, you can then just transfer them out to a garden if you have one. Um, Green onions, lemongrass, if you're familiar with how they have small roots at the bottom, if you have any part of that with a root, you can put that in water. They will regrow. And then tomatoes and peppers that you may have, you can just take the seeds out and plant the seeds. Here are the Harris County Master Gardeners. So, like I said, they did a video series. When the pandemic started, they started a Facebook group called Growing with Plants in Nature virtual group. Feel free to go on and join them. You just have to answer a few questions and then you are a member. But they did pineapple, romaine lettuce, and then they did some of the seeds from a pepper. In this example, they did a pineapple, so you can just take a, you know, just a normal pineapple, cut off the top. I've seen this toothpicked over water in a glass of water before, or you can just do it straight in soil. And then to the right here is it. This is probably a few years old. I had one years ago, so I will say that they can be a little bit pointy. So you just want to be careful, you know, when they're around um, really young kids. With this, I found a 12-page PDF with instructions, one-page instructions each on each of the vegetables that they had, things like avocado, basil, cilantro. There's a two-page quiz with that. So I will, that will be on that PDF also. It was just too much to put in here, but it was just too wonderful to not tell you about. Let's see, making recipes. So really, you know, I think we think about gardening as just going out and gardening, but it's connecting that garden to our nutrition and that we can actually grow our own food. So this recipe came from LGEG, the Learn, Grow, Eat, Go program. And you can see the recipe on the left. This is one of my favorites. It's something that I think if somebody told me the ingredients, I would have been like, yeah, okay, maybe I'll try that sometime. But when I did the LGEG training, I actually tried it and I was sold. So a couple of the ingredients like carrots and then the lemon juice, some of those, you know, a lot of us have lemon trees in our yards. So those are probably the two ingredients that we can actually get from our garden. But you may well know that kids are just more likely to eat something that they helped grow or that they helped prepare. So depending on the age, they could just help with measuring and you know the yogurt out. For older kids, perhaps they actually do the cutting. These are more. This is a page I think there's about 10 recipes here for the LGEG program. You can see down spinach quesadillas, minty sugar snap peas. I always think that's interesting. So LGEG, as I said, is it's basically a curriculum for teachers. But I think with what they have going on now, I think parents could possibly also register. But there is a limited time free virtual pilot program going on right now. It did start September 7th, but I think you would still get all the material. Still have a few weeks to go. So if you're interested in that, you may want to look into that pretty soon. Uh, but in that program, they go over plant parts, the space needed to grow vegetables, how to take care of vegetables, and then it even goes into My Plate. So talking about those USDA food groups that are, what's recommended, fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. The next one is watching seeds grow. So this can be done in so many different ways. This example, this diagram has a clear cup. I grew them in mason jars. When you put the lid on near the window, you don't never have to worry about spritzing them. They stay pretty moist in there for quite a while. But basically, you start with a jar. You wet a paper towel, and depending on how big the jar is, you may have to put more of the wet paper towels in, so that way when you put the seed in, you can see it. So it's kind of pressed between that paper towel and the plastic or the glass. This particular image is from a cylinder garden handout. And again, I will pass this along to you in that PDF. Cylinder Garden is a program that we do here in Harris County where teachers can register their students if they have a garden at school. But here's another version. So this is a paper greenhouse. I created this for a conference I did before. You can tape it. You can see I taped it up to the window. You do have to really be careful, if it gets too hot, too cold. But that's always fun. And as these seeds are growing, the kids can see how the roots start to grow and then how the root hairs start to form. And then if you leave them in there long enough, it's usually beans. I think I used lima beans last time. Then you can see how the stem starts to grow up. Uh, these these seedlings, these would not do well if you transplanted them into the garden, though. It's really just being able to observe. And then that goes back to what the kids can do. They can either draw diagrams along the way to show the progress of how that seed has developed. They can start a journal. So depending on the age, there's a wide variety of things that those kids can do. But just to watch those observations. And, this would be good for classes, but it's also for anyone that has kids at home. And I'm going to send this on that PDF too. So a pizza garden. So now the previous activities were, a little bit basic. Perhaps better for younger kids, but really any of those activities that I showed you, I mean, I even enjoy. So I think there's a timelessness to them. But when we get into actually planting a garden, uh, you know, this may be a garden that you already have started. This particular one, this is a pizza garden, and this PDF comes from the county extension agent in Brazoria, Stephen Brugerhoff, and this is pages, so you're only seeing one. So this is going to be a little bit more detailed. You'd want some kind, obviously a garden, A round one would be kind of cool, but you know, we might not always have that option of creating a round structure in our yard. So have a pre-existing garden, wooden stakes, some string, and as you could see on that diagram, they just split up that circle into even pie shapes. And then you can do a mix of vegetables and herbs. This photo is a pizza-ish garden at a school. Um, they have mostly herbs and then like lettuce that would, you know, create salads to go with that pizza. But in the diagram, there's tomatoes and eggplant, even onions. But what the picture does show you is how this garden, it could tend to be it's really cozy. The plants may be really cozy with each other, and that's okay as long as there's enough room for them. So the next projects, they're just going to be a one-page picture, and we're just going to talk about some things. This doesn't have to do with plants, but obviously insects affect our plants a lot. And I did this with a summer camp group, and I just created the different categories and had them, you know, write their name by what their favorite insect was. But this is just one example. You can also kind of do this in different ways with individuals. If you have a couple kids at home, instead of writing their names, it would be a list of their favorite insects. I tricked my nieces one year because they said that they did not like any vegetables. I don't like any vegetables. None? Well, maybe one or two. And I said, okay, well, let's start listing out. And it turned out, to their surprise, that they liked way more vegetables than they didn't like. And that was all because we created that list. So I feel like that was a really major win in my life. Um, paper pots. Um, so this is a picture from our Growing with Plants in Nature group. And we had, well, we're going to go back to it, but right now, you know, we are virtual, but typically it would be in person, and there would be, you know, 4, 5, or 6 stations set up all around the community center room, and they would go through and do all the activities one at a time. Well, one of them was paper pots. So you can take newspapers, cut strips, and uh, and then create basically uh, like a decomposable uh, pot for your seedlings. I'm not really sure how they made these. There is a little dowel that you can buy, but really if you just take any kind of narrow jar and then you just roll it around that jar, leaving an overhang at the end, fold it in, and there you have a pot. The trick there is you just want the newspaper to be long enough because you don't want it to just fold over, you know, once or twice because then it'll fall apart. You want it to wrap around a few times. And with that, all you need is just newspaper, scissors, and then the potting soil, and then whatever seeds that you want to grow. This is another project they did with seed pods. This is probably one of my favorites that they do since I'm a huge fan of seed pods. And then, of course, the okra just dries so wonderfully. Uh, but basically, you could collect different seed pods in the fall and winter, and some of them naturally have holes. Otherwise, you can just tie the string around it and create a mobile out of the seed pods. I always love that one. Then you could do things with the actual leaves or flowers. So on the left, that's leaf rubbing. So that would be more for really young kids. You know, you could just do the side of a crayon. Uh, but it's really important to identify what you're tracing because that's part of the learning process. So this is I think this one's a sugar maple. But the older the child gets, you can just readjust. You know, maybe they don't want to just do a rubbing, they can do a tracing, or they actually have the leaf to the side and then they just try to um, freehand draw it. To the right was a project I did with some kids. That's just air dried clay. So gently pressing the leaf into the clay. That dries fairly quickly. So before it dries, I just took a straw and created a hole. So once it dried, then you can tie like a ribbon or a string around it. And then after these dried, we took some watercolor. You wouldn't want to go straight like acrylic paint because uh, it would just be way too dark. I think if you used a watercolor, some of those deeper colors would fall into the to the impressions, but then it would be softer, so there would be more of a contrast. And this is not strictly plants, but it is, oh, and I have that labeled wrong. So this is just collecting. So this is as easy as just collecting plants, flowers, insects, little plant pieces around your house. And if you have a table or a place where, those things can stay for a little while, you can just keep adding to the collection. This is always such a hit with kids. Um, and I don't know what it is about, those things can live outside and they may, just pass them by or they may see them and, point at it once and walk by. But once they take possession of it and put it into a collection, and then it's not surrounded by other nature too, it really is something that they come in, they look at, they really take pride in. And then obviously there's a lot of things that you can find that when you look at it, you think, I have no idea what this is. So then, you guys end up looking that up. And all the way to the left, that's one thing that oh, I wish I would have included, but those are spore prints. So if you take a mushroom very carefully, so this part, it would definitely have to be an adult or an older child. If you cut a mushroom carefully, try to cut most of that stem away. You can have a piece of paper, construction paper, gently set it down with the gill side down. And then you want to cover it like with a bowl or something so that way there's no wind. And then those spores will fall exactly how they are, um, with those gills. The tricky part is some mushrooms have white spores, some have dark. So I got lucky with those ones. And it could take a day or two. And then of course, once they're done, they could easily blow off. So you want to be careful, but it's such a beautiful, delicate little project that you can do. So here are some of the resources that I used today. Um, like I said, with the PDF that I have, those will be active links, and there's many more than this that you'll get. And I'll probably try to send that out late next week. Try to make sure most everyone has done that survey. It's only like, I don't know, 2 minutes. It's really quick. And it does really help us. Um, and one last comment. So I misspelled cool kid with a K. That was a little nod for my niece. She has what's called Coulin-de-Vries syndrome, and that's with a K. And so they tend to call each other and their kids cool kids. So that's for her. So that was very purposeful. I think if we have a moment, I'm going to see about, I'm going to unshare and then I'm going to share a quick video on creating those paper pots. Are there any questions otherwise?
None
Brandi,
that
I
I.
think. Go ahead. Go ahead,
Go
Shay.
ahead, Paul. None that I saw of Brandi.
Okay. All right, so this is going to be without the sound, but just have to readjust here. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to post this link on our Facebook page sometime today. It's just real quick. So basically, this is just using newspaper. That's a wooden dowel called a pot maker, but you can use a jar too. So these are going to be about 3.5 to 4 inches wide, 10 inches long. And then you just roll. See the lip that they're leaving? Now, if you're going to make a lot of these, I do like this little device, but if you're looking to save money, you can just definitely use the bottom of a jar and fill and plant. So once the seedlings are grown, that paper is going to be pretty moist and discolored from uh, from watering it, and you won't have to take it out of the newspaper. You can just pop it um, directly into the ground. And that's all I have for you today. Let me see. I did unshare, right?
Yes, you did. You are good. Um, Everything looks good. The one thing I
Okay.
thought was interesting, Brandi, is somebody, if I can find it now, they use dry okra to make music. I'm assuming the seeds rattled around on the
Oh,
inside.
yeah. Yeah,
So
they do. Let me see. Hold on. I have an okra here somewhere. Oh, oh, here it is. Although, you know what? You might not be able to hear. Here. Can you hear that?
okay, yes, we can.
I told you I liked them. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. If you don't have any other questions, thanks for joining us today. Next week, we will have Amanda Cripple doing, is it food safety? Which
Yeah.
is really falls along with our gardening, because a lot of times, we have our vegetables and our fruits, but we still have to be safe with how they are handled and what we do once we harvest them. So thank you for joining us. See you next week.